In general, the book comprising the Tanakh may be divided into two categories: those composed by an author whose identity is known to us, and those composed by an author whose identity is not explicitly stated. The first category includes, among others, some of the latter prophets, which are written in the first person, with the main character talking about what happens to him and about his prophecies. The second category includes the books that describe events from the perspective of an anonymous narrator, without disclosing his identity. This group includes, among others, the 5 books of the Torah, which are written from an external perspective rather than the first person. The Tanakh itself does not deal directly with the question of who wrote the 5 books of the Torah, nor does it describe the way in which they were written and conveyed to the Hebrew people. So with that said, what is the Torah? I believe a layperson's answer is the 5 books of Moshe. Well, let's see if we can put some meat on this summary of what the Torah is. The term Torah, and even the book of Torah, appears many times in Tanakh, but in most cases, the plain meaning of the text is not referring to the 5 books of the Torah. The word Torah actually has multiple meanings in Tanakh, and only in some instances does the word refer to a written text. It appears for the first time in Exodus 12:49, and its meaning throughout this book, as well as in Leviticus and Numbers, is a law or collections of laws on a specific subject. We see this in verses such as Leviticus 7 verses 37. This Torah for the burnt offering, for the meal offering, and for the sin offering. Leviticus 14:54. All this Torah for every lesion of zarat, which is leprosy. We see it in Numbers 5:29. This Torah of jealousies when a woman goes astray. In other instances, the word Torah is a synonym for commandments, statutes, and judgments, as we see in Genesis 26:5, Exodus 16:28, Jeremiah 44:10. Now we get to the book of Deuteronomy, and in that book, the word Torah refers to a text, which, on the one hand, is clearly extensive, but on the other is more closely defined and limited than the way in which we use the term today. A review of the appearances of the word shows that the corpus referred to as Torah is, in fact, Moshe's main speech in the book of Deuteronomy, which is conventionally known as the speech of the commandments or the speech of the mitzvot. This speech, occupying chapters 5 to 26 of the book of Deuteronomy, is one continuous, uninterrupted monologue containing an extensive list of commandments, mitzvot. Let me repeat this statement. A review of the appearance of the word shows that the corpus, that is the word Torah, shows that the corpus referred to as Torah is in fact Moshe's main speech in the book of Deuteronomy, which is conventionally known as the speech of the mitzvot, the speech of the commandments. This speech occupies chapters 5 to 26 and is one continuous uninterrupted monologue containing an extensive list of commandments. At the beginning of this speech, we read, "And this is the Torah which Moshe set before the children of Israel." Deuteronomy 4:44. "And this is the Torah which Moshe set before the children of Israel. These are the testimonies, statutes, and ordinances which Moshe spoke to the children of Israel when they went out of Egypt." The plain meaning of the text here suggests that the Torah means the things Moshe was going to say from this point onwards. At the end of the speech of the commandments of the mitzvot, Moshe commands the children of Israel to set up great stones after passing over the Jordan. We read in verses 3 of Deuteronomy 27, "When you cross, you shall write upon them all the words of this Torah, in order that you may come to the land that Yah, your Elohim, is giving you, a land flowing with milk and honey, as Yah, Elohim of your forefathers, has spoken to you." He says, when you cross, verses 3, "you shall write upon them all the words of this Torah." This command seemed to refer to the writing of the speech of the mitzvot, that is, the speech of the commandments, that Moshe has just presented here in the book of Deuteronomy. That is, the same Torah that was just concluded. That is what he's asking them to pen down. It is only in the book of Deuteronomy that we find for the first time any mention that the Torah was also committed to writing in the book. This book, which is called the Torah, which Moshe has just presented in his speech in Deuteronomy, is mentioned for the first time in a very specific context, and it was concerning the king. Deuteronomy 17. "And it will be when he sits upon his royal throne that he shall write for himself 2 copies of this Torah on a scroll from that Torah which is before the Levitic Kohanim." Towards the end of the book of Deuteronomy, we are told explicitly, "Then Moshe wrote this Torah and gave it to the priests, the descendants of Levi, who carried the ark of the covenant of Yah, and to all the elders of Israel." Which Torah? The speech that he has just given in the book of Deuteronomy. What is included in this Torah? The conclusion to be drawn is that the book which the Torah records Moshe as having written did not include all 5 books, but rather only the central portions of the book of Deuteronomy. With regard to the famous command to Joshua, it is interesting to note, we read, "The book of the Torah shall not depart from your mouth, and you shall meditate over it day and night." The expression, book of the Torah, at least in the book of Joshua, indeed refers to the book of Deuteronomy rather than the whole of Chumash. In some cases, the reference is to a specific subject, and as we have seen in the example of the book of Joshua, in the other instances as well, it is verses from the book of Deuteronomy that are concerned. Now, we come to King Amaziah. Concerning this king, the text tells us, 2 Kings chapters 14 verses 6, "But he did not put to death the children of the murderers of his father, King Joash, according to that which is written in the book of the Torah of Moshe, whereby God commanded, saying, Fathers shall not be put to death for children, nor shall children be put to death for fathers. Rather, each shall be put to death for his own sin. Here too, the quote is an almost verbatim repetition of Moshe's words in his speech of the mitzvot, his speech of the commandments in the book of Deuteronomy. We read in chapters 24 verses 17 of the book of Deuteronomy that fathers shall not be put to death for children, nor shall children be put to death for fathers. Each shall be put to death for his own sin. So in the book of 2 Kings, chapters 14 verses 6, when it says, "But he did not put to death the children of the murderers of his father King Joash," according to that which is written in the book of the Torah of Moshe, is referencing the book of Deuteronomy, not the whole of the 5 books. In the book of Daniel, chapters 9 verses 1, we find mention of the curse and the oath which is written in the Torah of Moshe. This reference is to the unit on the blessings and the curses in the book of Deuteronomy, because the unit on the blessings and the curses in its concluding verse is defined as a covenant, and this is what the book of Daniel is referring to. It is the book of Deuteronomy. So we have seen, therefore, that the word Torah has multiple meanings. Throughout much of Chumash, the 5 books of Moshe, it refers to various statutes or laws, whereas in the book of Deuteronomy and at various points throughout Tanakh, the plain reading of the text as Torah appears to refer to large portions of the book of Deuteronomy written by Moshe. Subscribe.